There is something over your stove that could catch fire, and no one ever warned you about it. You cannot see it, tucked under the hood where you never look, but it grows thicker every time you cook, and hardly anyone thinks about it until the day it matters. It is not the wiring, and it is not the stove. It is the grease over your own head. And before I am done, you will understand what it is, why nothing you tried ever worked, and why the women before us never let it build over the flame. Maybe you have tried. Maybe you bought the orange bottle that promises to cut grease and stood up on your toes with a wet rag until your shoulder ached and got a little of it, the top layer, and told yourself that was as good as it was ever going to get. And within a week it was tacky again under your finger. That was not your arm giving out on you, and it had nothing to do with how hard you work or how clean you keep your home. You were simply never told what that grease had quietly become, and so you were fighting it with the wrong thing entirely. My name is Maria, and what I share here is the old way of keeping a house, the way my grandmother kept a kitchen, back before there was a hood at all, when the grease from the pan still had to go somewhere and a woman still had to answer for it. And the old way does not begin with a bottle. It begins with understanding what is actually happening in the air over your stove. So here is what that grease truly is. When you cook, the oil in the pan does not simply splatter and land nearby. Some of it lifts up into the air as a mist so fine you cannot see it, a haze of tiny droplets that rises with the heat and drifts up into the hood, and it settles on the metal and down in the filter, a little more with every meal. If a hot pan ever climbs past what they call its smoke point and begins to shimmer and smoke, it is throwing far more of that oil into the air than you would ever guess. On its own, that would only leave a greasy film, the kind you could wipe away on a good day. But something else happens to it up there, and this is the part almost no one understands. The heat of your cooking reaches that settled oil day after day after day, and the oil begins to change. It oxidizes, which is a slow way of saying it reacts with the air and hardens, and with enough heat and enough time it does something stranger still. It polymerizes. The loose oil knits itself together into a tough, sticky film that is no longer really oil at all. If you have ever seasoned a cast iron pan on purpose, baking thin coats of oil onto it until they turn into a hard black shine, that water rolls right off, then you have already seen this exact process, only there, you wanted it. Over your stove, that same process is happening where you never wanted it, turning soft grease into a kind of varnish, a shell, baked onto the metal, the way a coat of paint dries onto a wall. And once it has set, it is no longer grease. It is a hardened finish. That single fact explains every failed evening you ever spent up on your toes with a rag, because a finish does not wipe. You cannot lift a dried, hardened film with a cold cloth, no matter how strong your arm is, any more than you could wipe the paint off a wall with a wet sponge. That is why the spray fails you, and why you quietly blamed yourself for something that was never yours to fix. Cold water and ordinary dish soap simply cannot break a grease that has hardened into a shell. And this is worth understanding, because catching that grease is the filter's whole reason for being. That mesh and the angled metal baffles behind it are shaped to make the rising air turn a sharp corner as it passes through, and grease, being heavier than air, cannot make the turn. It flings out and clings to the metal instead of carrying on up into the fan and the duct beyond. So the filter is not an afterthought, bolted to the bottom of the hood. It is the part built to take the grease, so the rest of the hood does not have to, which is exactly why it is always the first thing to clog solid, and the first thing that has to be dealt with. But two things can, and the women of that old kitchen leaned on both of them long before anyone could have explained the reason. The first is heat. Heat softens that varnish and melts it back down toward the loose oil it once was, so that it will finally let go of the metal it has gripped for so long. The second is a gentle alkali, and the humblest one in any house is plain baking soda. Grease and an alkali have an old quarrel between them. When the two of them meet, the alkali turns the very surface of the grease into something much closer to soap itself, so it loosens its hold and lifts away into the water instead of clinging to the metal. That is the whole secret, and it is exactly why the old way was never to scrub. The greasiest, most stubborn part of the entire hood is that metal filter, the mesh grill of 100 little squares packed solid with hardened oil. And the old way was never to fight it in place. It was to lift it out and lay it down in water as near to boiling as you could manage, with a good handful of baking soda stirred through, and then to do the one thing almost nobody has the patience for, to wait 10 minutes, 15, no scrubbing at all. The heat and the alkali do together the quiet work that no hand ever could, and the grease releases itself from the metal on its own and rises to float on the top of the water in a soft gray film. An hour of scrubbing loses to a still, hot soak every single time, because the scrubbing only ever fights the varnish, while the soak actually dissolves it. And the very same truth explains the hood above your head. The reason a hot, damp cloth left to rest a moment against that greasy underside will lift what a cold spray never could is the same reason exactly. It was never really the wiping that mattered. It is the heat softening the hardened finish first, so that by the time the cloth passes over it, the grease has already loosened its grip and is ready to come away. There is one more piece of this that finally explains something you have lived beside for years without ever naming it. Up inside the mouth of the hood sits a fan, and its whole purpose in life is to pull the cooking air up and out and away from you. But those blades gather the very same hardening grease as everything else, and a fan clogged heavy with it can no longer move the air it was built to move. So the smell of last night's dinner hangs on in your kitchen deep into the morning, not because the hood is broken, but because it is straining to breathe through a filter and a fan, both caked shut. And when a hood can no longer pull that greasy air away, the mist it was meant to catch simply drifts on past it and settles over everything else in the room, the tops of your cabinets, the ceiling above the stove, that thin, sticky film that somehow appears in places you know you never cook. The grease you ignore up in the hood is slowly greasing the whole kitchen around it. Even the light over your stove tells the same quiet story. That small bulb behind its little lens goes dim and yellow over the years, and you come to believe the light itself is simply wearing out, when all that has truly happened is that a film of grease has settled across the glass, dimming it the way fog dims a window until you can hardly see the pan in front of you. And now the reason that none of this was ever only about a kitchen that looks clean for company. That grease, hardened and thick down in the filter, hangs just inches above an open flame or a red-hot burner. And grease burns. Grease is fuel. Hot oil has what is called a flash point, the heat at which it will catch and go up on its own, and a filter packed solid with old grease sitting directly above the one place in your whole home where the fire actually lives is not simply untidy. It is the beginning of a kitchen fire. And cooking is the single most common way that house fires start. This is why the women who came before us treated the space above the flame the way that they did. They may never have known the word oxidization, but they understood it in their hands and in their habits, that the kitchen is the one room in a house where carelessness catches fire, and that grease left to gather over a flame was a danger to be kept in check, and never a chore to keep putting off for another day. There is a last thing worth understanding because it will save you from a mistake and from being sold a thing you do not need. Not every hood over a stove is the same. If your hood vents to the outside, then that metal filter is meant to last you for years and be cleaned again and again, not replaced, no matter what the man at the store would dearly like to sell you. But a good many hoods do not vent outside at all. They pull the air through and blow it straight back into the room, and to do that, they hide a second kind of filter, a black one, made of charcoal. And charcoal does not hold grease by being washed. It works the way charcoal has always worked, by absorbing its surface, quietly soaking up what passes through it, until at last it is full and can hold no more. You can no more rinse that one clean than you could wring out a soaked sponge and call it new. That kind is never cleaned. It is replaced. The metal grill you keep for a lifetime, and the charcoal you renew once it is spent. Two filters, with two opposite fates, and simply knowing which of them hangs in your own kitchen is the whole difference between caring for it and ruining it. My grandmother cooked in the same kitchen for 50 years, under the same flame, and she never once let the grease gather over it. Not because anyone had ever warned her of the danger, but because keeping that space clean was simply a part of cooking to her, as ordinary as washing the pan when she was done. She understood what the grease was, and she knew that heat and a little patience would beat it every time, with no special bottle and no harsh smell in the house, and so she cooked under that hood safe until the day she finally hung up her apron. That is the old way, and the old way still works.